Music man, lead us off. Hello and welcome to this MIT Virtual Town Hall. And thank you, Marty Marks of MIT's Music and Theater Arts section for that wonderful opening music from Jerome Kern. I'm Alfred Ironside, Vice President for Communications, welcoming you to the second in a series of gatherings across our community. In a moment, I'll hand off to Raphael Reif, President of MIT, and our outstanding panel of faculty and staff. But first, a few reminders on accessibility. We are live captioning this event and also have simultaneous sign language translation. Notices for both were sent out in advance. We also have an audio-only call-in line for those without a strong internet connection. And this event is being recorded and will be available at this URL for viewing anytime. Now to our format. As with our first town hall, we have gathered some of your questions in advance, but this time we will also be responding to your questions live, as many as we can get to. You can submit questions through the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. Our purpose today is to offer an update, to share what we know about the complex factors shaping the decisions ahead of MIT, and there are a lot of factors to talk about, so let's begin. With pleasure, I pass the floor to MIT President Raphael Reif.
Thank you, Alfred, and to our students, and parents, and staff, and faculty and alumni, warm greetings from Cambridge. Actually, to be more precise, warm greetings from Grey House. We are all members of the MIT community, and that means we have a lot of things in common. Among those, we care for one another and we care for MIT. COVID-19 has affected and is affecting all of us, but it's affecting some much harder than others. So as we work on solutions to the challenge of COVID-19 on our campus, let's recognize, let's be sensitive that each of us is experiencing COVID-19 differently. And each of us have different points of view. So let's respect those differences and let's show empathy for those who are going through a very difficult time. And let's find solutions that work for our whole community. We had closed our campus about 8 weeks ago or so. 4 weeks ago, we had our first town hall. Since that town hall, we updated the community on our financial situation. We also shared some decisions on the summer. Today's town hall is not to share additional decisions. Actually, today's town hall is mostly to share our thinking about decisions we have yet to make. And top of that list is when and how we will reopen the campus. We have not made that decision yet. We have many people from all parts of campus working together to come up with scenarios on how we can reopen the campus and when. All these individuals are organized in working groups, and the leaders of all those working groups are with us today to share their thinking and to answer your questions. In addition to them, we also have members of the central administration that will be available to answer your questions as well. One of the most important issues that we have to consider before deciding how and when to open the campus is the state of the public health situation and the state of medical science. And for that, we have a terrific guest today, a person that I deeply admire, an MIT professor of the practice, who is also the director of the Reagan Institute of MGH, MIT, and Harvard. And this is Dr. Bruce Walker. He is on the front lines of much of the research going on these days to overcome COVID-19, and he is a terrific advisor to all of us. Bruce, thank you so much for joining us.
Happy to be here.
Bruce, the picture is so complex. I would like, if you can, to just clarify it for us. So before we open the campus, we have to pay attention to social distancing and testing and tracing and medical treatments, perhaps even vaccines. What can you tell us about the landscape? How would you advise us to consider the landscape in terms of reopening the campus?
You know, it's really, there's an experiment going on right now that I think is giving us knowledge that helps direct those sorts of decisions. And that experiment is happening in hospitals across the country. Mass General is one example that's where I work as a clinician. And the reality is that using personal protective equipment and monitoring for symptoms has resulted in in healthcare workers actually being able to be safe. The problems for healthcare workers have come when they haven't had masks to use, and they haven't had the additional personal protective equipment when they're interfacing directly with patients. I think the emerging data suggests that if you wear a mask and everybody else wears a mask, the chances of transmission drop dramatically. I think if you add to that frequent temperature monitoring, the chances of transmission drop even more, because you can identify people with a fever right away and remove them then from the community. And so what we need to think about is what resources do we have right now? What knowledge do we have right now that might guide us? And I think the knowledge we have is a suggestion that, a pretty firm suggestion that judicious use of masks and social distancing or physical distancing and symptom and temperature monitoring will have a dramatic impact on transmissibility.
Can you, I mean, as you probably are guessing or knowing, there is tremendous anxiety on when we'll open the campus, and for that we need to use the information you told us. At the same time, we also have to try to imagine and have a crystal ball on what will we know that is different from today, perhaps 4 weeks from now, perhaps 8 weeks from now. If we will know nothing different, then we might as well make a decision right now. Mm-hmm. But if things are changing, what can you tell us about that? And I'm not suggesting you can tell us exactly what's going to happen. Nobody has a crystal ball, or perhaps you do. But my main point is, what do you think might change? Why is that we probably should wait as long as we can, as opposed to deciding today?
I think there are a couple of things that will become apparent. One of them is surveys to understand just how many people have been infected and just how close to herd immunity we may be. Herd immunity is when enough people have been exposed that the likelihood of one person encountering an uninfected person diminishes to the point where ongoing transmissions become less. We don't yet know if antibodies are protective, but there's reason to assume that those are. And we'll know more about that from animal experiments that are ongoing right now. I think that will help to guide that. But I think we'll begin to get a sense of just how widespread the infection has been. And I think that that'll be important information for us to understand. I think that's also, as tests become more available, we'll be better able to monitor for example, the whole population at MIT to when students come back to follow them. I think the other really important thing that's a little bit further on the horizon is the development of high throughput, inexpensive saliva-based testing for virus itself. And we sponsored a webinar on Friday that I'd love to send out, make available to the people on this town hall to watch. There are some extraordinary advances being made by professors at MIT and their graduate students and postdocs that give me reason to think that we may not be, that it's within the foreseeable future that you can get up in the morning and brush your teeth and at the same time take a Q-tip and swirl it around your nares and stick it in a tube and have it turn color if you're infected and not turn color if you're not. We will get out of this predicament that we're in because of science and engineering and technology, and MIT is the focal point of that in the world, in my view. And when you watch what is happening on this webinar from people like Feng Zhang and others, you'll have reason to be hopeful.
Bruce, thank you so very much for joining us. I really appreciate it. And you have always been available to us to advise us, and we'll keep abusing of your time for as long as you let us. Bruce, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I think we're going to move now to what I mentioned at the beginning. We have different working groups working together to try to come up with scenarios for us for the fall. We have working groups on residential life, on academic or research, on the use of physical space and staff and community. They appear to be different, but the truth is that all those recommendations, everything they're coming up with, really those elements intertwine with each other. So we really have to have not just working on those areas, but have working them together, which is why we're going to just introduce them right now jointly and ask a few questions, and then I'll be ready to answer your own questions. And let's start with residential continuity, and that's for Susie Nelson to start with, our Vice President and Dean for Student Life. Susie, thank you for joining us today. You know, I hear from you and others that the #1 challenge you're facing, or we're all facing, is how to repopulate the campus, and that includes how to bring staff back, faculty, students, and postdocs, and so forth. Your big responsibility is, of course, students and dorms and residence halls. So what are your views? What are you thinking about repopulating this fall when it comes to residential areas?
Thank you, Rafael. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining today. Let me just provide a little bit of context, because we actually have 2,000 people living in residence now. We have 1,300 graduate students and 200 undergraduate students, and around 500 partners and spouses and children and house team members. And so as we look to the fall, I will say we've been thinking really hard on this, but we still have a lot more questions than answers. And the main point that I want to make today is that we really want students to help us problem solve. And there's a few ways that they can do that. The first is we have been sending out some surveys to those who live in residence and those who live off campus. And we've been asking you to tell us about your experience. And that really helps us think about what the fall might look like, having a good sense of how it is for you right now. And the second is, yesterday we invited all students to take a look at a problem statement that's online. And we created a We Solve for Fall idea bank. And we would really like you to engage with us, all the questions that we have. There's a lot of resources there, some that Bruce just mentioned that you could take a look at. But we would like you to engage with us in that way. And we also invite you to join one of 2 mini town hall meetings that we will have after this big town hall. Those will be held on Wednesday, May 13th. One will be for graduate students and the other will be for undergraduates. They will be hosted by our student leaders and our heads of house. So please look for those details, and we really hope that you'll attend. And then finally, as we think about these problems, I think they can be framed in really 2 goals. The first goal is that we know we will have some new constraints, but how can we look at this in a creative way and really reimagine the MIT campus so that it's positive and special and as intellectually and personally engaging as we want it to be. And then the second big goal is, as we make these decisions, how can we be sure we prioritize community health and well-being for all who are here on campus? So within these two main goals, we have some considerations that I think students can think about. What values, what all of us can think about, what values should play into these decisions, and how should we make these housing assignments for our students when they return? What strategies will be the most effective as we try to manage the spread of the virus and keep our community healthy, especially in our residence halls? And then finally, how do we get buy-in and how do we communicate effectively about these new ideas so that they can be implemented with some effectiveness? We're really fortunate because we have faculty who live in our houses, and I'm very happy that two heads of house are joining us today. And they have a lot of experience certainly as professors, but they also have experience living in residence with our students. So I want to give them a moment to talk as well about what they're seeing in the residence halls and how they view this. David Singer, he's our department head and professor of political science, and he lives in McGregor House, an undergraduate community. And Julie Shaw is a professor in Aero Astro, and she's the head of house in Sydney Pacific, which is a graduate student community. So David, let's turn to you first. Could you offer some thoughts on what you think about what's before us this fall?
I can. Thank you, Susie. Happy to be here. When we think about Susie's questions in the context of the undergraduate dorms, two considerations jump out. First is that every dorm is different. They range in size from 93 to 500 residents, and they have different configurations of rooms, bathrooms, kitchens, lounges, dining halls, and common spaces. And second, each dorm has its own form of student government that serves as a steward of that community's traditions. So I think the way forward in the coming weeks and months will be for each residential community to think about how students circulate in each community, to think about how to foster social interactions in a safe manner. And on that, we're partnering with modeling experts from IDSS and other units, and we're listening to experts like Dr. Walker. And for the students in each community to take the lead in designing new guidelines that respect the unique physical and social features of each community, and that also importantly respect the safety of the more vulnerable members of each community. And this is MIT, so the outcome will be new traditions. It will hopefully be clever strategies that no one's thought of before, and importantly, continuity in some of the core aspects of residential life that make MIT a special place to live and to study.
Great. Thank you, David. Julie, what are some of your observations as head of house in Sydney Pacific?
Thank you, Susie. So I'm currently in a dorm with more than 400 students, and I can say that Sydney Pacific exemplifies what a thriving campus community looks like, despite these very challenging circumstances. We have a strong community in SP, but frankly, our community did seem to depend on physical gatherings. And back in March, I will admit, I did worry for a moment that social distancing would bring everything to a halt, and that was silly. You know, we have weekly movie nights, game nights, virtual dinner series, group coloring sessions, book club, and many other events continue on, both for those that are on campus and off campus. And it's small efforts to make each other feel heard and cared for that have gone a long way. Our students are not only coping, but they're innovating. So seemingly overnight, they mobilized a collaboration with MIT Medical to implement suppression measures against the coronavirus. The effort was actually sparked by student questions in the dorm. Can we understand utilization of our common spaces in the dorms, like common kitchens, bathrooms, laundry, and the risk of exposure to the virus in these places? Grad students are now working with Lincoln Lab to help test and improve privacy-preserving mobile apps that may help in alerting residents of potential exposures. Thanks to our students, there'll be ways for more to get involved soon. And it's really all very MIT, and it's something to make us all very proud.
Thanks, David, and thanks, Julie. Those are great thoughts and comments. And again, we really appreciate your partnership, and we are looking forward to working together with the students. So please go to the Idea Bank and also join us for the mini town halls, which will be next week. Raphael,
thank you, Susie. Thank you, Susie. Thank you very much for everything you do with so much care for our students. And thank you, David and Julie, for joining us as well. Moving on to academic continuity, and that working group is led by Ian Waits, our Vice Chancellor for Undergraduate and Graduate Education. Ian, can you tell us a little bit about the scenarios you're thinking? How are you beginning to envision options for us for the fall?
Yeah, thank you, Raphael. So I would say first at an individual level, we're anticipating that we will have staff members, faculty, students who either may be ill or may be high-risk individuals, so that we could have situations where we have faculty who can't be on the physical campus and students who can, and vice versa. So we have to be sort of two-way remote capable for much of our curriculum. That's a heavy lift, but we're preparing to do that. The bigger question that I think a lot of people are interested in is what will the fall look like in terms of how much online education will we have, and how much in-person education will we have, and what does it mean to be socially distanced in our instructional spaces and labs and project spaces and classrooms and things like that. And as I listen to Bruce, it's pretty clear that things are changing so rapidly that one of the best things that we can do is plan for multiple different scenarios very, very vigorously and prepare for those, but wait to make decisions until we learn more. So we're planning for things that go all the way from a fully online fall to having all of the students back, to things that are in between, half the students for half the time. And I, at least as an optimist at heart, I'm very hopeful that we will have at least some students on campus in the fall, but it's constrained obviously by social distancing and by testing methodologies and things like that. So we're still working with a range of different scenarios so that we can be prepared as we learn more in the weeks ahead. There's so many people that are working on this. I want to highlight sort of a couple individuals who've been very helpful in thinking through different aspects of this. One is Rick Danheiser, the chair of the faculty, who has, in just a wonderfully thoughtful way, helped reimagine and rebuild policies as we go through this whole process. And so I'll first turn to Rick and ask if he can comment a little bit about all of that, because it's just an important part of moving forward in whatever we do. Rick?
Thanks, Ian. Good afternoon, everyone. As I described in an email letter to the community just this past weekend, I'm leading the Academic Policy and Regulations team, we call APART, of faculty and students, which the faculty officers created in mid-April as a successor to the Emergency Academic Regulations, or EARS team. You may recall that it was the EARS team that developed those emergency regulations, including the pass no record grading scheme in effect for the spring. So as we formulate the policies associated with our academic program for this summer, and that will apply in the fall, the APART team has been guided by several principles. First and foremost, our aim is to develop policies that will promote and support an educational experience for our undergraduate and graduate students that is as full, as enriching, and as rewarding as possible. At the same time, we strive to recognize and be sensitive to the fact that individual students and individual instructors may be facing very different challenges and obstacles as we navigate our way through the current emergency. As one example, this week, the academic policy team is working to finalize a plan for student and subject surveys. From the outset, the team recognized that the usual numerical subject evaluation system was not appropriate for this unusual semester, in which instructors in many cases had less than 2 weeks to jury rig a remote version of their subjects, sometimes while simultaneously dealing with health and personal challenges of their own. At the same time, a part appreciates that we have a responsibility to gather feedback from and listen to our students, and we do not want to lose the opportunity to gather valuable input and advice on how to improve our subjects should it be necessary to offer remote versions again in the future. So with the help of advice from students and the expertise of the MIT Teaching and Learning Lab, I believe that the system we are developing and will announce hopefully within a week will achieve these goals and prove valuable to the community as we plot our course forward in the future, Ian.
Great, thanks, Rick. Just one of dozens and dozens of examples where Rick and his team have worked through faculty committees and engaging students and things to sort of figure out how best we can plot the way forward. I'll also note that Rick is one of the faculty members who had 2 weeks to spin his class up on its head and jury rig it and make it work. So he also has some personal experience with that. You know, both David and Julie mentioned that so much is happening that's just so very MIT. Bruce Walker did as well. One of the things that'll happen in the fall, no matter what scenario we have, is that there are going to be a lot of very MIT experiences. And one of the people who's been helping to imagine those is Associate Dean of Engineering, Pekko Hosoi. So I'm going to ask Pekko to just share a little bit about that.
Great, thanks, Ian. Yeah, I guess I want to start by echoing what you just said and what Rick has just said, which is that, you know, I think the faculty and the students have been put in an extraordinary position, and the sort of the resilience and the response that I've seen from both of those communities have been really remarkable, and that actually fills me with a lot of optimism for the fall. To the students, you know, I think some of the faculty have adapted, and we're gonna get better. It's gonna just get better as we learn more. So, you know, I think the one sort of the bigger thing that sort of umbrella thing that I wanted to say is that I think MIT we've been sort of at our best when we are stepping up in the service of the local community, in the service of the nation, and in the service of the world. And I think that is not just true in our research, but also in our educational efforts. So one of my colleagues, Warren Searing, has a fabulous presentation where he shows the evolution of the mechanical engineering curriculum. And you see that in the late 1800s, when the nation was building bridges, we were teaching metallurgy of iron. You know, then we went on to steam engines, and we dropped metallurgy and we put in thermodynamics and boiler design, you know, and then we went on to electrification, and we dropped boiler design and we went on to surveying and electrical engineering. And so you can see that our programs evolve according to the national needs and evolve to address problems that are of immediate relevance. So I think we're going to see more and more of that. I think there are already a lot of faculty that are doing that. I think you're seeing groups of that popping up around campus. And I applaud everybody who's putting in that effort.
Great, thanks, Pekko. So I think, as I said, independent of what path we choose in the fall, and I'm sort of optimistic that we'll have a path that has at least some of our students on campus for some of the time, hopefully more, that I think there'll be some really great experiences, great learning experiences that befit MIT's history and mission going forward. And obviously happy to take lots of questions on that later. Thanks, Raphael.
Thanks to you, Ian. Thanks to, let me just say again, as I said publicly, I thank you and admire for all the work you've done. It's almost heroic to bring us to this point. And Pekko and Rick, thank you also for joining us in this journey. Well, you have no choice. You have students you have to teach, but thank you anyway. Let's move on to space. And now we have Associate Provost Christian Van Vliet, who leads the working group on space use. And Christian, the question that some people have is, well, we have government guidelines on safe distancing. How do you anticipate us practicing those guidelines in our classrooms? Christian, are you there somewhere?
I am. Thanks, Raphael. That's a very reasonable question to ask. Of course, it's on all of our minds as we bring even more people onto the campus. As Susie mentioned, we have people who are on the campus now, but as we bring more people back, how will we do this? And I think this is a puzzle. We enjoy solving puzzles at MIT, and we have a very active and dedicated group who are thinking about this. But what's already clear is that there will be a lower density of people in any given space. So if you think about a lecture hall, there will be fewer people in that lecture hall, but the education should and will be just as vibrant. But it's not just the lecture halls, which are obvious. It's how will we do performance-based learning and project-based learning and laboratory-based learning. So we're thinking about that from every curriculum's perspective. What will the classroom of the future, when we bring more students back to campus, look like? And I think it's important to be aware that that will always have a few things in mind. It's not just about bringing the students back to campus, but it's about the well-being of the students and the faculty and the staff, and that's all equally important. And here, the staff are the people who help to design and deliver those classes, to clean the restrooms and the buildings and the laboratories, to take care of the research teams and the administration. And so as we think about all of those people being in the buildings together, we think about the well-being and the flexibility and the adaptability as being important components of the planning.
Kristen, thank you. You have done also an amazing job. I think you're the only one, or one of the very few, that is allowed to go into every single space on campus. We don't let anybody else. So that's a very dubious privilege that you give yourself, Kristen. Thank you for all the work you do.
You're very welcome. And I should say, we're all eager to get back to the campus, Raphael. The picture behind me, I did take a couple of weeks ago. So you're right, I have the privilege of getting to see the campus in its current state, but I'm just as eager to be back in my lab and my classroom as anyone else.
I agree with you, Kristen. Thank you. So let's move on to the research engine. Lots of people are asking, when are we going to bring that research engine back? And Maria Zubers is our VP for research, and hopefully she's ready to answer that question. Maria, please.
Sure. Hi, everybody. So our efforts in the research enterprise are in two critical areas. The first is funding continuity, and the second is planning for a phased opening of our research labs in a way that prioritizes the safety of both the MIT and the surrounding communities. So in the area of funding, we're closely monitoring our current grants and future funding opportunities. Federal agencies under OMB guidance have given great flexibility in the execution of current grants for a period of 90 days, and we're working with government colleagues and our peer institutions to advocate for not only funding enhancements to existing grants, but also talking about the importance of proceeding with new proposal solicitations. Our non-federal partners in foundations, and especially in industry, are undergoing extraordinary financial challenges, and we're in communication with many of them to try to minimize the impacts to our researchers. And we're working with our Vice President for Finance here and the Provost to understand the extent of our exposure so we can develop mitigating strategies. Now, to plan for the ramp up of labs, I instituted a faculty-led process. I held virtual meetings with over 20 department lab and center heads to receive input on the factors that they considered important in restarting research on campus. I then formed a committee representing a subset of this group, supplemented by critical staff and chaired by Professor Tyler Jacks to develop guidelines for ramp up, which we distributed widely for comment. The issues raised were not all academic. For example, among the most often cited needs are on-campus parking and childcare. The committee is now coalescing the input to develop an implementation plan for a phased lab opening. While we don't have a firm date yet to announce at this time, we're following the guidelines from the Massachusetts state officials very closely. And I'm now going to turn it over to Tyler to provide an update on the committee's activities.
Well, thanks very much, Maria, and good afternoon, everybody. Let me say at the outset that this was a very engaged process that involved 9 MIT faculty members and several senior MIT staff who worked really effectively to come up with a set of guidelines to help us think about a sensible way to come back to our research activities. I'll talk about those in some detail in a second, but let me start by making a few general points. The first is that although most of our research activities have moved to the off-campus setting over the last couple of months, there is significant research taking place at MIT, including quite a lot in the area of COVID-19 research. And Bruce Walker actually mentioned some of that earlier, and that's quite exciting. Secondly, when Maria constituted the committee, she was very clear about the scope, and specifically that it related to research that needed access to laboratories or needed access to equipment in order to be done. And therefore, we assume that the current policy that work that can be done remotely will be done remotely will stay in place during this phase of the research ramp up. And the third general point is that we recognize that when we come back to campus in this fashion, there will be individuals who cannot or choose not to come back for a variety of reasons. And so the committee was very clear that with respect to all members of research teams coming back, it would be voluntary. With respect to the planning itself, the committee took the approach that we wanted to get back to research. We're all anxious to get back to research, but we have to do it in a fashion that represents the safest possible set of practices. So therefore, we anticipate starting with a low density work environment, as Kristen described, that will allow us to be well within CDC guidelines in terms of safe work practices. And over time, as conditions allow, we envision future phases that allow more individuals on campus at a given time. To stay within the prescribed density and occupancy parameters, groups will have to develop shift work schedules, either multiple shifts per day or alternative day schedules. The committee left the development of these plans to each individual faculty member or principal investigator with oversight from their DLC heads. We've also discussed additional safety measures that have been already described on this, in this meeting, and these will include mandated use of personal protective equipment, daily health checks, as well as frequent sanitization of personal workspaces and common areas. Lastly, the committee was clear about the need during the ramp-up phase to integrate the level of research activity across campus so as to ensure that shared research facilities as well as MIT central services are not overburdened, and that the staff performing these functions also have safe work conditions. So I'll stop there and turn it back to you, Maria.
Okay, and obviously in all of this planning, we've been assisted by our medical professionals, and also we've gotten a lot of help from Kristen's office and space and many others. So Raphael, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you, Tyler. Look, I mean, needless to say, the research enterprise is so important to all of us. I'm grateful that people as busy as the two of you are willing to just give us so much of your time to make sure that we bring that engine back. Much appreciated. Let's move quickly to community and related issues. I think we're ready to go to the Q&A, but I would like us to stop on our culture and community. And for that, we have Ramona Allen, our VP for Human Resources, and we have John Dozier, our Community and Equity Officer. Let's start with Ramona. Ramona, whatever we do, we have about 10,000 people at MIT working. So whatever we do thinking about faculty and students, clearly we have to think about the staff too. There are a significant fraction of MIT on campus. So what do you know about how is the staff doing? Do they enjoy working from home? How are they holding out?
Well, I think staff are coping pretty well, actually. I think they've done extraordinary things over the past several weeks. I guess it's 8 weeks now. It's hard to believe that much time has gone by. I think they're doing extremely well, but there are also some concerns. You know, staff want to come back to campus just like everybody else. They're interested in helping get our community back up and running, and they want to support all of the efforts of the faculty and the students as well. And they, you know, we miss each other. We want to be around each other. We're social beings. We need to be together. I think, you know, when you look at all these scenarios, we have to think about how this is going to apply to staff. And I think first and foremost, you know, when people return to campus, and it'll probably be in a phased way, Staff need to understand, those of us, especially in administrative roles, that we might not be the first people to be asked to come back to campus. I mean, I'm in that category. When I look at administrative people across the campus, right, that's many of us who might not be in the first round of the reentry process. And so I think people have to be patient with that and be understanding. Because when you bring staff back to the campus, you know, that means more deliveries, more other staff will be needed to be on campus. We're going to need more facility staff, more police, more security, you name it, right? So that just increases things overall for every single category. We also have to look at how people get to campus, right? So if people are taking public transportation, for example, you're going to have more people on these trains. Now, it's my understanding that there's some social distancing measures that are being implemented on subway systems so that people will feel safe when they're coming to work, because sometimes that's the only way many of us can get to work. So those are a few things. So there are people who will need to have back on campus pretty quickly, and then there are those who may have to wait before we are allowed back on campus, and it's basically for our own safety, and we have to just be patient about that. There are masks. What happens with, you know, if Cambridge is requiring everybody to wear masks? Do we provide those masks? Do we ask visitors to wear them? How do we enforce all it? Lots of things that are in play here. And lots of people around campus who are thinking about this deeply, who care about it, and we've been spending a lot of time on it. So I think in general, staff are handling things very well. I think they're eager to get back to campus just like everybody else. So thank you.
Ramona, thank you. And thank you for what you do with HR. I really appreciate it. John, you have been at MIT for how long already?
All of 49 days.
Well, I mean, you almost have a degree from MIT. John, I hear that you're organizing a survey for all staff, students, and faculty. So can you tell us a little more about it?
Sure thing. Thank you, Raphael. One of the characteristics that makes MIT special regards the many ways, both formal and informal, that we can connect and engage with others in our community. The sense of connection, belonging, and inclusion is vital, not only to the strength of the community, but also to the health and well-being of people in it. We therefore must ensure that we continue benefiting to the greatest extent possible from the diversity of people, perspectives, experiences, and engagement opportunities that enrich our individual and collective teaching, learning, research, scholarship, work, and decision-making, while doing so in what is, for most of us, a completely online environment. I'm working with Tim Jameson and Marianne Kirkbrot to lead a community continuity group that's comprised of a representative team who will guide both short-term efforts and a longer-term strategy that's focused on these concerns. We initially responded to a rising community need for central information and assembled most of our online community support resources in one place on the ICEO website, with a link to this information on the COVID-19 website. But Raphael, regarding how we will gain an understanding of how our community is doing specifically, we understand that there are many needs that exist amongst members of our community since the beginning of our response to the COVID crisis, but today we have little empirical evidence of the scope and scale of these needs. As such, we're tapping into our faculty expertise and working with institutional research to administer a series of pulse surveys, short surveys that take a few minutes to complete, that will help us to better understand where to target our attention and resources, thereby maximizing the sense of community, connectedness, and belonging for all students, postdocs, staff, and faculty. This is one of the many tools that we'll be using to stay connected, understand, and respond to our community's evolving needs in an ongoing fashion during the uncertain times ahead of us. Our plan is to launch the first survey before the end of this month, and we will, of course, share the results with the MIT community. If anyone has questions or recommendations for the Community Continuity Group, I ask that you email us at communitycontinuity@mit.edu. Thanks, Raphael.
John, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. And I bet you those 49 days have not been boring at all.
They haven't.
Thank you, John. So let's now move to the Q&A part of the conversation. Let me just say that for this part of the conversation, we have also joining us to answer questions our Provost Marty Schmidt, our Chancellor Cindy Barnhart, our VP for Open Learning, Sanjay Sarma, and our VP and General Counsel, Mark DiVincenzo. So Alfred, do you have any questions rising up at the top that you want us to answer?
Yes, indeed. We have a whole bunch of questions, nearly 200 at this point, and they've all been terrific. So just a quick reminder from me that as we move into the Q&A, remind you, you can still submit questions using the link near the bottom of your screen. We're not going to try and answer in the order in which these came in. Instead, we're focusing on the most frequent questions. And just a reminder, of course, there are some questions we simply don't have answers for just yet, but we'll let you know what we know at this stage. And so, Raphael, by my reckoning here, certainly the number one questions have to do with budget and financial support for students. I think the most frequently asked question so far has to do with tuition in the fall. If it's going to be a fall semester primarily online, will that affect tuition? That's one question. And a related one has to do with our support for graduate students. We know that there has been a petition circulating to ensure that grad students get the support they need, and that's a question that's been coming up as well.
Let's see whether Marty Schmidt or Provost Marty, do you think, can you answer those questions? One is tuition in the fall. As I think the way I understood it, Alfred, if it goes online, what would that do to tuition and support for grad students and the petition? Marty, are you on?
Yeah, I am, Raphael. Can you hear me?
Perfect.
Yes, we can.
Become accustomed to turn off the mute. So yeah, let me try and answer that, Raphael. As you know, under our normal process, each year we announce tuition and financial aid in the early spring, and that's exactly what we did this year, where we announced tuition and fees for next year would increase by 3.8%, but we also announced an increase in the undergraduate financial aid budget of 7.8%. And just as a footnote, our undergraduate financial aid budget for the coming fiscal year, we budgeted at $148 million. But clearly these are no longer normal times, and we're focused on trying to determine what the fall and spring will look like. Without that picture, it's really hard to think about tuition in the normal way in which we do it. So our focus right now is what will the fall and spring look like, and then we'll make determinations about the financial needs for the students and the tuition. I will say that in our rebudgeting process, as we experienced in the 2009 crisis, we fully anticipate that the students' need for support will go up, as you don't have to look any further than the 30 million people that have applied for unemployment. And so for that purpose, we have actually increased even beyond the 147 million, our budgeted financial aid budget for next year. The last thing I think it's important for me to point out is when we're thinking about tuition, it's important to recognize that 60% of our undergraduates today receive MIT scholarships, and actually 31% of the undergraduates don't pay tuition based upon important need. So that's the question on tuition. I think you also asked about what we're doing for the graduate students. And this is an area we've been working really hard on with both the deans, the vice chancellor, and the chancellor, Cindy Barnhart. I'll say a few things, and then Cindy may want to say more after, maybe just to correct things that I don't get right. We're taking this issue in several steps. The first step is really to address the concerns about summer support. So last week we announced the establishment of a short-term emergency fund that's going to address instances where students' summer plans have been disrupted and they need support. There's a lot of diversity in the amount and type of need that's needed, and this is really based on the vast variety of graduate programs that we have. And for that reason, we're working with each school and college dean to ensure that we have the resources to address the full need for their particular programs, and that those resources are allocated in a way that's appropriate for the local need. I'm confident that we can meet the full need of those schools, but we have to address it at that local level in terms of assessing the need. I've met as recently as today with the deans to confirm our plans and review them. The second step is really to address impacts that COVID-19 is having on students' progress towards their degree, and the legitimate concerns about whether or not they're going to be supported into the fall term, what that means about their support, degrees, extensions, and the like. And that's where we'll turn our attention next once we have the summer support issue nailed, which is obviously the most pressing. I'd also say that I'm really pleased to say that last week we announced that we accepted the recommendation developed by the Graduate Student Council's Graduate Stipend Committee, where we'll be increasing graduate student stipends by 2.9%, and that we've also announced that health insurance rates for our medical plans will not increase in the coming year. So those are the things I wanted to share. I don't know if Cindy, you want to add more, or back to you, Raphael.
Good job, Marty.
All right. Thank you, Marty. Alfred, have another one?
Yeah, I sure do. In that same vein, a number of people are asking about our support for international students who face other kinds of hurdles, some of them financial, but of course, questions of travel bans and visa issues. So a number of questions are asking how MIT plans to support our international students.
Very good question. Maria Zuber, our VP for Research, you want to take a shot at it, and maybe I'll ask Cindy if you want to add something, Maria?
Okay, so I'll start, and then Cindy may want to jump in. So we're monitoring the situation closely. Of course, we continue to be in contact with our colleagues in Washington to try to explain the importance of getting these international scholars onto our campuses. We're monitoring the situation closely, and we're in touch with these students to try to essentially be ready to hit send as soon as the visa situation opens up to get everything submitted on time. Cindy, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, I think maybe Mark may want something, may want to comment on this. Mark?
Sure. So we understand that there are a number of circumstances beyond the usual circumstances of international students and scholars being able to freely come to MIT and to stay at MIT. And so we're looking at a number of different scenarios in which we understand that potentially there might be remote research, remote learning, and we have a small group right now looking at all those situations to see how we can have what the options are, what our flexibility is, what the legal constraints may be, what negative effects some of our practices might have on people's visa statuses if they're now in their home country and may not return, all with the understanding that we want to support the continuing scholarship and education of our international students, as well as the new community members that are coming to MIT. So all I can say is we're working hard. We're trying to have flexible options. We're working with the International Students Office, the International Scholars Office, as well as our Vice President of Finance Office and my office to come up with a scenario to understand both the compliance issues as well as to ensure that we're providing as much flexible options for our international students and scholars.
Thank you, Mark. I forgot to ask Maria a question. Can I put, Maria, can you say something? I want you to see you on the screen one more time.
Okay, I'm back.
At the first town hall, I asked you what was your screen background, and I have to ask that question to you again. What's the screen background right now?
Okay, well, last time I was on Mars, and I'm still on Mars, but I'm in a different place. I'm actually in the western part of the Valles Marineris, which is a canyon that's about as wide as the United States. So.
Well, I assume that was the right answer because I have no idea, but thank you, Maria. Alfred, you got another one?
Sure do. And this, again, is coming from a number of folks. So let me start here. Actually, maybe Bruce will help us with these questions. It goes back to how will we ensure safety on campus, Raphael, when and if students are returning in the fall. A few questions related to that. A lot are asking how will we ensure the safety of students and staff on campus. A related question is, will MIT supply face masks? And the third in this group is, do face masks do the trick? And do we need social distancing if we're all wearing masks?
Well, clearly, I think that Bruce is a little more qualified than I am to answer the question of is face mask all we need. I think what I can say is that we will consider seriously about the supply of face masks and how to make things easy for everybody in the community, if that is where we're going. But in terms of, are we going to be asking everybody to wear masks? If a decision is made today with what we know today, unless Bruce tells me that I'm wrong, the answer is yes. Will we know anything in 4 weeks or 8 weeks or in 4 months to decide differently? Perhaps. I'll leave that crystal ball up to Bruce. But I think, as you heard Bruce's comments earlier, a face mask is a safe way to proceed with the knowledge we have as of today, and we're planning along those lines. But Bruce, do you want to add anything to what I said? Okay, I guess that I'm right.
Yeah, no, just to agree that I think face masks are really the critical component here, and I think there's every reason to believe that coming back to campus is going to be associated with everybody wearing face masks. It's hard for me to believe that by September that will not still be a recommendation.
Thank you, Bruce.
And Raphael, may I? Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Someone else was speaking.
Yeah, I think that there was a sort of related question about if one wears a face mask, does one not need to do social distancing? And I think the simple answer is everything helps. So most likely, face masks will be part of the process, and one will be advised to practice social distancing policies for the foreseeable future.
Well, thank you, Tyler. I missed that one. I appreciate it. Thank you. Alfred, you have another one?
Yes, and this is another very, very popular question having to do with when we think we'll be able to make decisions about the fall, Raphael.
Well, let me just say that this is a pretty serious question that we are thinking about on a daily basis, pretty much. With what I know today, and again, I rely heavily with advice from people like Bruce and Tyler earlier. I mean, the people who understand this much more than I do. I would like to wait for as long as possible that we know things might still change. I doubt that even if things are still changing, we'll wait much longer than 8 weeks to make that decision. So I would say that late June, early July, thereabouts, we should know enough to try to make the right decision for the campus. But as you heard from Bruce earlier, things are changing very rapidly, and we're monitoring that very rapidly. If at some point in time between now and then, we understand that things won't change much, we'll be ready to make a decision. But while things are changing and we're learning more and more every day, I think the right responsible thing to do is to wait until the last possible moment, although not much later than early July or so, to make that decision. That's where we are at this moment.
Raphael, I might add that I think that the fact of the matter is that at the Brigham and Women's Hospital, I learned this morning, there are, despite all the COVID patients there, despite all the activity and the chaos that's accompanied this surge in Boston, there have been only 2 cases of transmission to healthcare workers that were documented to have, that could be attributed to something happening within the hospital. Obviously, MIT is not the same as being inside the Brigham, but it really points to the fact that judicious use of face masks is something that really does make a difference. Social distancing is not as possible in the hospital, so it's probably not adhered to as much, but to Tyler's point, social distancing will also have to be something that's implemented and maintained.
Thank you, Bruce. Thanks. Alfred, you have any other questions?
I sure do. And this one, Raphael, is maybe more specifically for you and maybe Ramona. President Reif, you wrote last month that you'll do everything you can to avoid cutting jobs. Is that still the case?
Well, let me see how Ramona answers, and then I'll try to correct what she says. Ramona, you want to give it a shot?
Absolutely. So layoffs are a last resort, always. None of us wants to go through that activity. We understand the economic climate. We know that if you were to leave MIT through loss of job, you're going out into a really tough situation. We are trying to avoid that at all costs. So we're doing everything we can to think this through and make sure a number of people weigh in. And those decisions are taken very seriously. So the goal is to avoid layoffs at all costs.
Thank you, Ramona. I fully agree with her.
Excellent. I'm sure our community continues to find that reassuring. I want to turn to a series of questions now about students who are considering perhaps taking a gap year, or new students who may be considering deferring. A lot of questions have come in about what would we say to a student who is considering either one of those? What would we say? And I think I know that Ian and his group may want to answer here. And
yeah, I can see that a lot of people would want to jump and answer that question. So Ian, Pecco, Cindy, who wants to be the first?
Maybe I can start.
Yeah, they're fighting already. Go ahead, Ian.
I share at least the positive news that I think we had a record undergraduate yield this year, and our graduate yield is very high too. So a lot of people are still very excited about coming to MIT. I think the hard question for everyone in thinking about deferrals is, what will the alternatives be at that point in time? And that's just a very hard thing to consider. But as with most things at MIT, we would do what's in the best interest of the students. I think if the students felt that it was best for them to defer, we would let them defer. So those are the kinds of things that we will, I think, learn more about as we understand more about what the fall will look like on the undergraduate side especially. But it's a hard question because we have ideas of what the campus environment will look like, but we don't know what the alternatives for people pursuing internships or travel, which is likely to be difficult still, will be. And as I said earlier, we hope to create still a vibrant environment on campus where students get to spend time with other students and learn about great things. So, hard question to answer.
Thank you, Ian. Does anybody else want to answer that question in the panel?
I'll just second what Ian said, which is that I'm not sure the question is much different now than it is at any time, right? At any time you're weighing which is the option that's better for the student, and I think we would do the same thing now.
Well, I think the main point is that we really are going to try to, as we do every year, try to make it very attractive and exciting for a student to be engaged at MIT. And whether that's on campus or maybe sometime away from campus, we will offer our students an experience that they will never forget that is very much MIT. That is for certain. Alfred, you got any more?
Yes, I have one or two more, Raphael. And again, I'm picking questions, my group is picking questions that are most frequently asked. Here's another one that I think is related, which is, it says, transitioning to college is hard. Doing it online would be even harder. How would you support first-year students if we're still doing remote teaching, even if we're on campus while we're doing it?
Ian, I think this is a great opportunity for us to share a little bit of what our students are telling us from their online experience, if you want, or you or Sanjay can do that.
Yeah, actually, or maybe, since I expect he has a lot of insight into how our students are reaching out both at CPW, but also planning for fall events. David Singer, I expect, could give us a real boots on the ground kind of a view about how our students hope to welcome other students.
David, you're on.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to speak about that. I think that our students are already creatively reaching out and trying to maintain a sense of community, even without the benefit of physical presence. And so the student governance process still continues. The meetings still continue. There was a lot of efforts to reach out to students during CPW that went really well and was just as creative and as quirky and as quintessentially MIT as it always is. And so I expect that's going to continue. And so if we're in a difficult situation in the fall where there's still distance and there are still students who are not on campus, then the students, the upper class students, will reach out to them and form a sense of community so that when we finally do reunite on campus, it's going to feel like, that there actually was continuity and community building.
Thank you, David. Thanks. Alfred?
I just want to see if anyone wants to add to that about the support for first-year students, if there's anything else on anyone's mind just before we go on. Because I'm going to shift gears now to housing if there's nothing more to be said on that. Okay, great. So the question is several things, and Susie Nelson, maybe this comes back to you, having to do with when will we announce decisions about housing assignments, number one. Number two, are we looking at the fraternities and sororities and other independent living arrangements, and how do they factor into the mix? And the third question is, what's the thinking around fall sports?
This is all Susie.
Thank you, Alfred, for that question. So the first one about assignments, we don't really want to start making assignments until we know what the program will be, the academic program will be. So we have a lot of different models. We had a good conversation with DormCon last week. And one of the things we talked about, the students suggested that perhaps we would do, this goes back to supporting first-year students, that maybe we would do a virtual assignment for new students based on their preference. So that would be a very nice thing, because then upperclassmen could connect right away with new students, depending upon where they get assigned to their house. So more to come on assignments and when that will all roll out, and it will probably align with when a decision is made about when we start and how we start, and how many people will be back. And that relates to the second part of your question, which was fraternities, sororities, and independent living groups. They are a very important part of our experience on campus. And we absolutely are thinking about the FSILGs and how they will be linked in with the housing process. We house about 1,100 students in our FSILGs ordinarily. So they're very important for housing, but they're also very important for just the social life on campus, the student social life and organizational involvement that students have. And then about athletics, no real decision has been made with athletics. The NCAA has yet, they're looking to advise schools, and our conference is also that we formed a working group to think about this and what it means for MIT and members of our conference, but decisions have not been made yet.
Thank you, Susie. Alfred?
I guess the next one, Raphael, is how are we going to support staff who feel uncomfortable returning to on-campus work, but who may feel peer pressure or direct pressure to return to campus? What's our overall approach to supporting staff in a gradual transition back to campus, both those who are eager to come and those who may be a little bit more concerned?
Ramona, you want to take a crack at it?
Sure. So for people who are concerned, our recommendation is always talk to your manager, your supervisor. And we can hear what those concerns are and then make some adjustments accordingly. The goal is not to have anybody come back and feel uncomfortable about it. You know, I think there could be some level of uncertainty when we come back. It's going to feel new for us coming back to campus after being away for so long, and then coming back in a phased way. But I think if you talk this through with your local administration, and if they need to consult with human resources, they should do that. And I'm sure we'll come up with a supportive plan that will make people feel as comfortable as possible under the circumstances.
Thank you, Ramona.
Welcome.
Here's one more, Raphael. Maybe Sanjay has something to contribute here, or maybe you do too. And this is a question about what we're learning from other countries who may be further along on the timeline of reopening college and university campuses, and are we in touch with them, and what are we hearing, and how are we integrating that into our thinking?
Yeah, maybe I'd like to bounce the question to Ian, because we did, MIT did reach out to a number of universities around the world and get some feedback, but Ian's been collecting that because he's trying to put that into our thinking for the fall. Ian?
Sure, actually, the person who's collecting is Richard Lester, who did a marvelous job crowdsourcing it through a lot of faculty members. So we have lots of information. sort of, again, a boots on the ground kind of a look at different universities. And then through Raphael's efforts, we've begun to establish some discussions with some universities at a higher level from around the world to see what we can learn a little bit in advance, to sort of see how things are going as they begin to repopulate their campus. So the short answer is yes, we are reaching out to individuals, and at Raphael's level, of course, universities leadership to understand how things are going, what their practices and policies are.
And what we're learning, I would say, is exactly what Bruce and Tyler and others said, which is masks, social distancing, phased, very careful, very thoughtful. And most of the universities that have given us information are in the very early stages, baby steps.
Yeah, I think the masks is absolutely the key here. One of the things that I was speaking with somebody in Guangzhou this morning, the university there, which is very close to Wuhan and had the surge go through that city, they've opened up and they're using temperature monitoring also as a way to try and identify those that are, that as a sentinel feature of a new infection. But the reality is they're not seeing a resurgence so far in those communities with those implementations. So that also, I think, makes us all feel more confident that that's a good way forward.
Yes, and the only thing that I can add at a high level, but we are really collecting all that information as you heard from others. The only other point that I can add that hasn't been said is that in many labs, the social distancing is also being translated into a timeshare. So there are shifts to work in the lab, whether it's days and evenings or 8 hours, or whether it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. I mean, there are all sorts of different variations on how to handle the activity in intense. In many labs, the density is pretty high in terms of interaction. And what I've seen done, and I have not seen that separated, face mask always present, but also much more separation among people in laboratories. But anyway, we're collecting all that information. Nothing that we have heard, and I just, from what I have read, I have not seen the whole thing very nicely organized, but the feedback that I've gotten directly that I've read is everything consistent with what we hear from Bruce and Tyler and all other experts. So it's all trying to do the same thing. What we are trying to get, in addition to what they are doing, is the results they're getting. So Bruce, you just heard Bruce describing how at Brigham and Women's they have a particular database that we can learn from. So I think that part is also trying to understand, so I can compare, or we can compare, how effective some institutions are applying the same kinds of safety procedures or protocols than others. Alfred, how are we doing?
We're doing well. I just want to let folks know that we're coming toward the end of the time we advertised, but I think we're going to run a few extra minutes here just so we can cover a couple extra questions, and then I know we have a story we want to share with the community as we wrap. But let me just get a few quick lightning round questions in, if I could, and hopefully we can get through these quickly. Here's a question for Ramona about childcare. Is MIT thinking about supporting childcare options as we begin reopening in the late summer and fall?
So we're examining all options right now. We're looking for ways to make enhancements to the childcare benefits that we currently have. And we can't do anything with daycare centers until the governor lifts the restriction. But we have a lot of people thinking about that issue as well. We know the importance of this, especially for faculty who have to come back and teach online if children aren't at camps or in daycare centers. So we're examining all of those possibilities and trying to be creative on top of it.
Super, thank you, Ramona. Sanjay, one for you, because I know you've been thinking about how to bring the voices of alumni into your planning for 2021 and beyond. And that is a question from alumni. Will they have a chance to offer insights and advice as you do your work with
Absolutely. I think we're all trying to figure out a new normal here. And there've been references to crystal ball, and the community is the crystal ball. and our alums will be advisors to this task force, and Rick and I welcome their advice. In fact, we will set up an advisory board for the task force and for alums.
Fantastic. Kristen, a lightning round question for you. Will there be a facility for self-isolation on campus if we have faculty, staff, students who get sick?
That's a great question. So we have that facility now for the folks who are on campus. And we do think that there will be, for a time, waves of infection, or at least the potential for waves of infection in the area. So we are working on plans to have isolation facilities as part of caring for the resident community. Just as a reminder, we have that for the resident community now, as well as the Collier Care Center for folks who aren't part of the resident community, but are part of the MIT community and need that isolation. So it's a resource now, it's a resource that we will continue in our planning.
Thank you, Kristen. Raphael, I'm going to come to you in just one second, but there's one question I wanted to make sure we addressed for Susie, and that is, there's a few students who tell us that they're struggling with mental health in this difficult time, and what advice can we offer, and how can they gain support?
Thank you for that question. So I think what's most important is don't suffer alone. Please reach out to us, because we are absolutely here for you. All of our resources are available online, and there's a great website which we will post after this session so that you can have easy access to it. The other thing I would say is make sure you're doing all those things, those common sense kind of things to take care of yourself. And, eating right, getting enough sleep, taking a break from Zoom, getting outdoors if you can, and doing something positive for yourself. And I guess the last thing I would say is what I have been doing is thinking a lot about what is right before me that I can control and do today, and not worrying so much about those things that are unknowns and I can't really do much about today. So it's kind of like the song at the very beginning of this session, pick yourself up and start all over again. I think it's been very tough for many of us to do that, because it's been a very challenging time. So please reach out. There are many who can support you right now.
Thank you so much, Susie. Just to note, we've had over 500 questions. And one of the final ones, Raphael, is for you, and very much on this same theme. How do you stay positive during this crisis?
Boy, I appreciate the question. I'm surprised by it, but thank you. I think there is a lot of suffering out there. Let me just start with that, because I feel it very strongly. I know, like I'm sure many of you know, people who have lost jobs, not at MIT, but elsewhere. I know people who have lost loved ones. So there is a lot of suffering out there, and that can bring you down. But MIT is a fantastic place. I'm just simply thrilled and fortunate that I work in a place in which it's uplifting. Everybody sees a problem they want to fix. They want to do something about it. When this thing started, the community just got up and tried to figure out how to help. And we're going to come back to it in a moment. So it's a place with a can-do attitude. It's a place that is optimistic. It's a place that believes that intellectual brain power, education, science, technology can make a difference. And that just keeps you going every day. And that's just part of the DNA of MIT. I'm just very lucky to be here.
Thank you, Raphael. And so I think that brings us to the end of the Q&A. And I just want to remind everyone that we had such a number of terrific questions. We will be trying to answer many of these questions online on the COVID-19 pages of the MIT website. So we'll let you know when we've answered many more of your excellent questions. But I think we got to everything that was asked multiple times, Raphael. So thank you and the entire panel for that. And now, Raphael, back to you.
Thank you, Alfred. So this is actually another way to answer the question you asked me, Alfred. I want to just spend just a couple of minutes, and with the help of a faculty member, showing how MIT has responded to such a difficult situation. As you heard earlier, we have more than 60 faculty that are involved in all sorts of efforts in response to COVID-19, whether it's providing life-saving medical supply, advanced testing. Bruce mentioned about developing new therapies and treatments and even advancing vaccines, and some of them even working in collaboration with Bruce and the Reagan Institute. So it's an amazing place how very quickly people figure out, I know how to do this, I can help, even if that's not what they were doing for research. But I want to just highlight one of them. Is an amazing colleague of ours. His name is Simon Johnson. He's a professor at MIT Sloan School of Management. And he has been part of an effort to help nursing homes across the state to face the crisis. So Simon, what can you tell us about what you've been doing?
Thank you, Raphael. Well, as you just mentioned, we went all in on COVID-19, like many of our colleagues and many people who are listening to this broadcast. Our focus, we decided about 8 weeks ago, was to try and help nursing homes, assisted living, and other senior care withstand this incredible and dangerous surge of COVID-19. And we worked long and hard to try and figure out how to do this. And about 5 weeks ago, I had a meeting with the head of the Massachusetts Senior Care Association, Tara Gregorio. And I thought at that point that we'd learned a lot, and we were quite expert, in my view, about what we could provide and what nursing homes needed. And Tara said to me, you know, Simon, there's one thing we need, and really only one thing right now, and that's more testing. And at that moment, I said to myself, that's the one thing we can't do. I don't know how to get more testing. And fortunately, my colleague, Retziv Levy, who was the brains behind this and who had a lot of the original ideas, said to me, Simon, call up the Broad Institute and see if we can get some of their tests. And they did provide those tests, and we connected them with Mass Senior Care, and then we needed test tubes. So where did we get test tubes? Where did we get the test kits to make this happen? MIT Medical came through for us. And again, this has been what's our experience, Raphael, which is we work the problem, we try to be smart about it, we are MIT, and we find colleagues. We have more than 10 faculty at MIT who've worked on this. We find students, more than 50 students have helped us with some aspect of this. We find people all around campus who are willing to give us ideas or test tubes or swabs or autoclave the swabs, whatever it is, whatever it takes. There's always somebody in the MIT network. And then there are the friends of MIT. There are people in the alumni network. There's the Schmidt Futures Foundation, which gave us a key early grant to make this work happen. There's the Biogen Foundation, which came through with a big additional grant just now that has in turn unlocked, I would say, a change in mindset and understanding at the state level. And the state has now provided $130 million to help nursing homes and assisted living and other facilities around the state. And now the real work begins, because the state's provided the money, but what's the strategy? How are you going to do it? How are you going to take ideas such as the one put forward by Bruce Walker several times today, masks? How do you provide better PPE for the people working in these nursing homes? How do you improve infection control? How do you make sure there are enough workers who are willing and able to work? Now, I don't have all the answers, but the community does. The people around Massachusetts do. We can connect with them. We can provide end-to-end solutions. We can provide all the logistics necessary to get the right experts from MIT and from other places and other hospitals, and even, I would say, other universities, I use that word carefully, in the community applied to this problem to help all the residents and all the staff in every single nursing home and assisted living in Massachusetts. And then, Raphael, the question is, and this question was put to me by the Biogen Foundation people this afternoon, they said, this is great, Simon, you're making progress, but when can we take this model and these ideas and show it to the rest of the country and help people everywhere in the United States think about how to protect the older members of their communities and everyone who works with them and tries to keep them safe? So it doesn't end, Raphael. It keeps going. It keeps working. And thank you, Raphael. And thank you, everyone here, for your leadership and your inspiration in these difficult times.
Thank you for your inspiration. Let me tell the thousands of people watching in the town hall that beware of Simon Johnson. He's a very dangerous man. This guy, a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago or so, no, 2 months ago, so I think, he called me on a Sunday afternoon at 2 o'clock. And he tells me, you gotta give me the governor tonight at 7 p.m. I said, Simon, you're crazy. What for? And he explained that to me. And I said, Simon, if every one of 1,000 faculty members say, I want to see the governor, do you think I should call them? No, but this is, you have to do that. Well, I did. And he showed up and he heard the idea, and then good things happened. So be careful with this guy. He doesn't stop. I want to tell you all that I got a letter based on the work that Simon did, a letter a few days ago from the head of the State Association for Senior Care. And in that letter, he referred to Simon and his MIT team who supported them through these very dark days as our guardian angels. So it gives me goosebumps, Simon. Thank you so much for all you're doing for the people who many people have just forgotten. Thank you so much. Well, we're done for the day in terms of this town hall. I want to thank all the panelists for participating and for the openness. I want to thank all of you for participating from all over the world. As you heard from us, we are facing difficult decisions. They are very complex. And we're going to find ways to invite all of you who want to contribute to offer your ideas. I also want to repeat again, as I started at the beginning, that we want to make our decisions as best we can with respect for everyone's opinions and experiences and with empathy and compassion. And let me conclude with something that I said at the end of the last town hall. We may be in 10,000 places, but we are still one MIT. And as they say in my the hometown where I come from, hasta la vista. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us, and thank you, Rafael. Just to remind you, a recording will be available at this URL shortly for those of you who can't wait to watch again. And please, Music Maestro, close us out.
We Can Work It Out by the Beatles, John and Paul.
Thank you, Martin.